Welcome to Wellsprings Community Church.
So our reading's fairly long, and I've tried to make it nicely sized so that you can read it. Yes, good. So we're continuing in our series in Galatians, and we've got to chapter 5 and verse 7. And so we're going to read that together now. And Paul says to the Christians in Galatia, "You were running a good race. Who cut in on you to keep you from obeying the truth? That kind of persuasion does not come from the one who calls you. A little yeast works through the whole batch of dough. I am confident in the Lord that you will take no other view. The one who is throwing you into confusion, whoever that may be, will have to pay the penalty. Brothers and sisters, if I am still preaching circumcision, why am I still being persecuted? In that case, the offence of the cross has been abolished. As for those agitators, I wish they would go the whole way and emasculate themselves. You, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly in love. For the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command: love your neighbour as yourself. If you bite and devour each other, watch out, or you will be destroyed by each other. So I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. For the flesh desires what is contrary to the Spirit, and the Spirit what is contrary to the flesh. They are in conflict with each other, so that you are not to do whatever you want. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. The acts of the flesh are obvious: sexual immorality, impurity and debauchery, idolatry and witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissensions, factions and envy, drunkenness, orgies and the like. I warn you, as I did before, that those who live like this will not inherit the kingdom of God. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. Those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. Since we live by the Spirit, let us keep in step with the Spirit. Let us not become conceited, provoking and envying each other." So, why serve? Why do we serve God as Jesus followers? We've almost answered those questions in the songs we've sung, and I kind of think I hardly need to say much more, really, but I will continue. At some point. Yes. So we've already sung about this being Jesus' example. Jesus was the servant king. He calls us now to follow him, and so we are his followers. It's very clear in the Bible that we are to serve. The Christian life is not an easy ride, and nor is it a passive one. So we are expected to do things. We are to offer our whole selves to God in worship and service. And reading from the Amplified Bible in Romans chapter 12, "I appeal to you therefore, brethren and sisters, and beg of you in view of all the mercies of God, to make a decisive dedication of your bodies, presenting all your members and faculties as a living sacrifice, holy, devoted and consecrated, and well-pleasing to God, which is your reasonable, rational, intelligent service and spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, this age, fashioned after and adapted to external superficial customs, but be transformed and changed by the entire renewal of your mind, by its new ideals and its new attitude, so that you may prove for yourselves what is the good and acceptable and perfect will of God, even the thing which is good and acceptable in his sight for you." And so, serving and doing things for God are part of our spiritual worship. The need is great, and it's now. And so I'm going to ask Barry Preble to come and talk to us about the street pastors.
Forgive me for being a bit stiff, but things have changed on a Saturday night. And walking around last night, because it was quieter, walking up and down from East Reach right down to beyond the bridge and down to the football ground 3 or 4 times in a night, you do end up feeling a bit stiff. So forgive me for being a bit stiff this morning. Street Pastors, as many of you will know, we are part of a national organisation set up by Les Isaacs, and basically we patrol the streets of Taunton. Since COVID, there's been a definite change. On the plus side, Taunton on a Saturday night is probably, we were talking about this last night, it was probably true to say that it's a slightly older group of people who come out on a Saturday night. Whether that's affected by the economic situation, we don't know. But older, I mean probably middle 20s upwards, and a number of much older people. So whereas previously we've been out until probably 3:30 in the morning, last night I was home by 2:30, so quite early. So what do? We basically walk up and down and keep an eye on the people enjoying themselves on a Saturday night. The common question we're stopped and asked is, you don't get paid for this, do you? To which obviously the answer is no. So why do you do it? And it's very interesting, some of the conversations you get opportunity to have. One that happened 2 or 3 years ago to me, and I've not forgotten, was outside the Cricketers in the northern part of Taunton. A very sober but group of young people stopped and wanted to chat and wanted to know what we did. In the course of conversation, one young man took me to one side and said, "Come on, I want to ask you a question. At what point in your life did your faith become real and not just religion?" When you're asked that at about 1 o'clock in the morning and you're not really ready for it, it does take a bit of double thought. But we must have spent 3 or 4 minutes in a serious conversation. I did have to say to him, you may struggle with this, I said, because I'm going to talk about what it is to have the Holy Spirit in you. And after I just explained briefly, he said to me, "I think I know a little bit about what you're saying. I used to go to church." And we had a few minutes conversation and we talked about faith. And his friends very much wanted to carry on and enjoy their evening, which I could understand. He didn't want to be interrupted. And so he then looked at me and he said, "Thank me very much indeed." And he said, "I'm going to now go and think about this, because I think maybe I need to go back to church." Sadly, those conversations are not every time you go out. But one thing that has struck me is, and again it happened last night, how many people are deeply appreciative of what we do. One older woman who was on the bridge and they were just checking their phone, stopped and wanted to talk to us and then said, "I'm so grateful to you." And her friend said, "What are street pastors?" So we spent a few minutes explaining. And her older friend, as I say, a woman in her 40s, turned to her friend and said, "I've been very grateful for these in the past. You do a wonderful job, thank you ever so much." And so although we don't always, and it's not the exception, but it's not common to have serious conversations, yet I do believe that the street pastors do represent the church on the street. As one man said to me, "Yeah, I know why you do it, but come on, why?" So I said, if Jesus was here on earth, he would not be in the church, he would be on the street. And he looked at me and said, "Yeah, I understand that, thank you." What he then went and taught, I don't know. But those are the opportunities. The sadness is, as I learned a couple of weeks ago, when Dave Knight, who's the head of the local organisation, started Street Pastors 10 years ago, the average age of a street pastor was 50. He said now 10 years on, the average age of a street pastor is over 60. We do need more street pastors. Yes, it means you have to give up one Saturday night. We'd meet at 9:30 in the North Street Chapel, go out at 10, and at the moment, pack up by 2ish. If it's a bad night, it could be 3:30. But and you just have the opportunity of walking the streets of Taunton. And I get opportunities to talk to people I would never be normally talk to, particularly young people. They obviously view me as very old, quite rightly, but it's lovely. They stop and they chat. And yes, it's a lovely privilege and an opportunity. So if you are able to give one Saturday a month, 9:30 to 2, 2:30 in the morning, maybe a little bit later, then please do. There's training actually now taking place, and the details of that are in Keep Connected. Ruth, thank you. Oh, I must mention, I forgot to mention, not only do they have street pastors, of course, on a Saturday evening, there are also street pastors in Halcombe and Priorswood. That takes place on the 2nd and the 4th Wednesday of each month, and again, they will walk the streets and talk to people on the streets. So again, they would welcome, if you don't like, are not able to do nighttime or you don't fancy that, then there is a daytime alternative, which is meeting the people in Halcombe and Priorswood. One word for your prayers. There is opened in the High Street, almost opposite Paddy Power, a slot machine shop. That slot machine shop is open now until 2 o'clock in the morning on a Friday and a Saturday. We went in to say hello, chatting to the two guys. There was no one in there. Chatting to the two guys who were running it. They said, he said, we'll do this Friday and Saturday night. The rest of the week we pack up at midnight. And he said, I think they're actually hoping that we can open 24 hours a day. It was interesting, my colleagues also had gone in and he'd said to them, my only concern is that people will spend too much money in here. Sad, High Street slot machine operation, now open in the middle of Taunton. We might pray about that.
Thank you very much, Barry. Tyler, can we have the video clip now, please?
There are a few occasions in a Christian's life when you can be absolutely certain you're doing what God wants. Being a street pastor is one of them.
Street pastors is such a lovely way to show God's love in this community.
It's a real opportunity for me just to stop and listen to people and talk.
To me, it's the opportunity to go out and do something which is really needed.
That's the main thing, is just going out helping people and then having that faith to go out.
So it means that we're representing Jesus on the streets.
This is just about trying to connect with people and show them Jesus' love.
We do actually just want to be here to make everybody and anybody safe, secure and peaceful.
The need is great and the results are amazing, but we need more volunteers. Volunteers during the day, during the evening and on Saturday nights, covering Taunton, Bridgwater and Wellington. You don't need to be an expert, you just need to love Jesus, love people and be supported by your church. The rest will train, so please come and join us.
The details are on the screen, so please get hold of us soon.
And those church members who are street pastors will be more than willing to help you. There are also school pastors and rail responders, and Linda's involved in the town centre chaplaincy. So lots going on in the town for us to be aware of, to be praying about, and to be considering whether it's something we should be doing too. And we're going to sing about that now, sing I, the Lord of Sea and Sky, where we say, is it me, Lord? Should I go? Thank you. So who do we serve? We've thought about why we serve. Who do we serve? The church family, the body of Christ. Paul says a lot about how we treat each other with love and respect. The church family or the body is very important, and our relationships with each other will say a lot to the community around us. If we cannot love and respect and support and serve our fellow Christians, then we aren't going to be very, very effective outside. So we're also here to serve our community, and we're endeavouring to do that in various ways. We always need more help with that. It's really important that we're not just a building on the edge of the Wellsprings estate, but that we're seen as somewhere significant. And we are building bridges with the community by having all sorts of community groups in to hold their meetings here. They always seem to be impressed by a warm welcome and by the coffee they get served and by the homemade cakes and the lunches even. And so it's really important that we do those things, because we can then say to them, well, do commend us to your clients, encourage them to come and visit us, and this can lead to all sorts of conversations. And so that is our service, and we want to be seen as something that's relevant to our community, somewhere where they can drop in for a not too expensive cup of coffee, or even just a chat. They can have a glass of water if they want, if they can't afford anything else. And there are ways and means of supporting those who can't pay their own bills. And so we are seeing progress in those areas, and it's really important that we keep doing that. You know, the church is not a cosy club. Cosy clubs downtown, but we're not another one. We're not a version of that. We are not intended to stay within the walls. And as Barry has just said, if Jesus was here, he wouldn't be sitting in the church all the time. He would be out there. He would be sitting in the gutter talking to those people that Tiff referred to a few weeks ago, saying, all these people are welcome at the table. And we need to tell them about the table. We need to tell them there's a feast to be had, that there is joy and peace in believing, even when life's hard. There are difficult times for all of us, but when we have God at our back and walking beside us and holding us and caring about us, it makes such a big difference. So many of those people around us have enormous struggles. They have really difficult times, and those times will not get easier as the financial situation worsens. And so it's really important that they know that we are here for them. And so we need to be out there and doing that stuff. And so the wider world is such a needy place. We can't compute how enormous the needs are out there. But it is crucial that every people, tribe and tongue, and people and nation hear the gospel. They hear the good news of Jesus and what a difference it makes in our lives. That work isn't completed despite the technology we've got. And I would love to have Barry talk about Wycliffe Bible translators as well, because it's key that the word of God gets to every person, that every person can have some part of the word of God. That is really crucial, and I believe that's one of the most important ministries that there are. So those who are otherwise unreachable can be reached with modern technology, but we're not there yet. However, we have a really important microcosm of the world in London, and I'm going to ask Andrew Glass now to come and talk to us about that. Thank you, Andrew.
I don't know if you what you think a missionary would look like. When I was growing up, I suppose I would have thought of a David Livingstone sort of figure in the back of Beyond somewhere. Well, in a couple of weeks' time, you'll have the pleasure of meeting a real-life missionary, as Carrie comes from the Philippines to talk to us. And I've read her prayer letters, and I think you're in for a real treat. If she's anything like her prayer letters in real life, I think it'll be quite an occasion. As a church, we support quite a number of missions, and we try and plan the missions that we support so that there's something around that everyone can get involved in. So whether that's Bible translation or street pastors, different things across different parts of the world, different ways of working, different particular missions, there should be something there that you will feel hooked into and able to pray about. And for me, it was a big shock when I met Joyce. When I started going to Joyce's church, to find that there were real-life missionaries in London. It never crossed my mind that there would be missionaries in the UK. And it's a bit of an old-fashioned name, perhaps, missionary. but there was one attached to the church that she went to. And I was just stunned, really. Firstly, that there was this need. Secondly, that the people that I came across didn't look any different from you lot out there. They weren't holy, as it were, in inverted commas. They weren't religious. They didn't, well, in those days, of course, they would have worn a collar and tie to church every Sunday, as most of us would have done. But they weren't obviously special people. Most of them had ordinary jobs before they became missionaries. And now they were serving the people of London. And again, in all sorts of different ways. So some of them were working in railway stations, some of them with ambulance crews, some of them with the homeless, some of them working alongside churches, some of them working with different ethnic groups. One person we know deals with a particular language group in London, and that is purely his focus. So a wide range of different needs. And I had a video to show you, but you've had enough videos this morning, of Weber Street, which is part of the mission that Joyce and I are particularly hooked into. That's a homeless centre, and 3 of the missionaries who work there, Rob Hooks, Neil Toomey, and Jean-Louis Cassie, are all people who've been to Wellsprings over the years. And if you met them, you would not imagine they could work together in the same building, really. Vastly different characters, and just with this real heart for the gospel and this real down-to-earth love of people. And missionaries are people who, their faith is just so integral to everything they do in their life. And that particularly comes across with the people who work in London. And they have this knack, as the missionary at Joyce's church did, of just pointing the finger delicately and in love at just the right thing to make you think. And when I was thinking about marrying Joyce, he said to me, "Are you a Christian?" And he had this manner where you could not lie to him. Somehow you just knew that in his words God was talking to you, and there was no way you could evade the question. You couldn't come up with a woolly answer. And so many of the missionaries that we've met have just had that about them, that way of getting alongside people and getting to the nub of what life's really about.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And that getting alongside people and knowing just what to say is very much a gift, and we're going to be moving into thinking about that in just a moment. So how do we serve? Is it the gift or is it the need? Do we do something because we have a gift for it? Paul is very clear that as a group of Christians, we are the body of Christ, and the body is made up of many different members with very different functions and very different abilities, and that is so with us too. So, do we actually know what our gifts are? The Bible tells us we all have gifts. Jesus had hard things to say about the burying of talents, and the same is true of us. People were given talents. One chap was afraid to use it, so he buried it. And when the master came back, he was very angry because he hadn't used that talent, which was an amount of money. And the same is true of us. If we have a gifting from God and from the Holy Spirit, we should be using it. Do you know what your gifts are? Do you think you know what they are? Do you need some help to know what they are? You know, all of that is available. There are sort of tables and things that you can fill in and tick boxes and work out what your gifts are. But we know, don't we? And if you know somebody who's been on the faith journey for a while, they can help you to think through these things. And I think often gifts emerge as we mature and become more confident. Certainly that's been the case in my life, that I have realised that I could do things. When I was a young person, I would never have thought of standing up here and talking to you folks, but I don't know how well I do it, but I can do it. And I've done it in my professional life. So some of our gifts are obvious. They're innate skills that we have relating probably to our preferences. God has made us that way. He's wired us in a certain way, and we are all different. So, as I've said, some may mature as we become older. But, some parts of the body, and we are a body here together, some parts of the body may seem insignificant, but they're not. The loss of your little toe can throw out your gait and your balance, and you may think your little toe is of little significance, really. But actually, if you have it amputated, it may affect the way you walk. So let's not despise what we think of as a lesser talent. In God's eyes, there are no lesser talents. Each of us is made in his image, and each of us has things we can do. So how do we recognise the call of God? Samuel, in the Old Testament, was a young boy serving in the temple, and he heard a voice in the middle of the night, and he thought it was the elderly priest Eli calling for him. And he said, "Here am I." And he went to Eli, and Eli said, "I'm all right. I don't need a drink of water. I don't need the loo. It wasn't me. I didn't call you. So go back to bed." So Samuel went back to bed, and again he heard this voice, "Samuel, Samuel." And he realized that the still small voice that he was hearing was God calling him. And Moses the same. God spoke to him in a still small voice, and we can hear the still small voice. It may be a persistent thought. I describe it as a nudge when I kind of get the sense that there's something God wants me to do. I get a nudge of the Holy Spirit. And it's really important that we start to recognise that, because it's so easy to write that off and think, that's just in my mind, that's my imagination. But it isn't always, and so it's important to listen and to know, and we have the knowing. When we've been on the faith journey for a while, we kind of know what it is we should be doing. So to move on, there are some hazards in this serving lark. You have to be careful of falling rocks, always be careful of falling rocks. The natives can be hostile. There's a risk that we're doing too much. When I think you find in a lot of churches that there's a certain group of people, a small group of people, all committed, who take on jobs because they need doing, and some of those jobs may be a calling, some of them may not be. And some of us can end up doing too much, getting burnt out. And God requires us to be human beings, not human doings. What he wants from us primarily is a relationship with him. And if the thought of a relationship with God is something that's new to you, please do talk to one of us afterwards, because that is crucial to starting your faith journey, just as Andrew's been describing. That happened for him in Joyce's church when he first met her. And it's just really important that you understand that. And so we can end up not doing what God has asked us to do. So we need to be very certain of our call, but don't let that stop you doing things. We just have to find a balance in every aspect of our lives, and finding a balance between what we do and what we don't do is just really important. It's very possible to be looking for human adulation and becoming prideful. Many people do lots of jobs because they want power and control, and I don't see that at Wellsprings, I'm pleased to say, but it's always a risk. And we have to watch that we are continuing to serve in a spirit of humility. And that's not false humility, like Dickens's Uriah Heep, and very humble. It's not that. It's a genuine recognition of who we are in the sight of God. Yes, we're creatures created by him, made in his image. And we should recognise our strengths and our skills, but we shouldn't be unduly prideful. So it is a balance. So, what is God calling you to do? Do you sense a nudge to be doing something? There is so much need, and there's so little time. I was going to have a closing hymn, but I think we'll pass on that, and I think I will just say the blessing, which is from Hebrews chapter 13, verses 20 to 21. Now may the God of peace, who through the blood of the eternal covenant brought back from the dead our Lord Jesus, that great shepherd of the sheep, may he equip you with everything good for doing his will, and may he work in us what is pleasing to him through Jesus Christ, to whom be glory for ever and ever. Amen.